In a small diner, siblings Joseph and Sydney reunite. Years ago, they pulled off a $7 million robbery, and Joseph now has the money with him. Sydney needs it to pay off debts and provide for her daughter, hoping to make amends for her past mistakes. But first, they must disappear. Joseph knows the perfect hiding place, but before they can act, police sirens force them to flee into the woods. After changing clothes and ditching their old ones, they reach a remote country house. A forgotten safe house from Joseph's past. As they arrive, they spot 3 armed men shooting bottles outside. Sydney confronts them, but only Joseph's presence scares them off. Inside, the house is abandoned and messy. When sirens blare again, Joseph leads Sydney to a pantry, insisting it's their way out. He sets the clocks in a specific sequence, and as they chime, the siblings step inside and shut the door. Thunder roars and Joseph hands Sydney a number to dial on an old telephone, instructing her to say a phrase and hang up immediately. Outside, police search the house. She follows the instructions, and suddenly, everything goes silent. When they step out, the house is transformed, clean, untouched, and still. They've made it, but Joseph reminds Sydney that they must stay hidden here for 14 days. The fridge is stocked with food and drinks, and a stack of discs sits on the table to help pass the time. On the first day, they rest. Joseph takes walks and surveys the land, while Sydney relaxes in a bath and tries on old dresses from the closet. By the second day, they cook dinner and chat on the porch. During the day, they count their stolen money, planning how to spend it. Sydney misses her daughter but reassures herself that soon, this will all be over, and they can live freely. They explore the house, examining portraits and practicing their shooting skills with scoped rifles. 13 days pass. One evening, Sydney reflects on the hidden value of old objects in the house, like a bullhook useful but forgotten by modern people. The conversation shifts to their bond as siblings. Joseph regrets not showing her enough love, but Sydney insists her life hasn't been too bad, she has a daughter, after all. Joseph, however, vows to make things right. Curious about their mysterious hideout, Sydney asks about Joseph's female friend who provided it, but he can't explain how it works. He only received her notebook out of pity. This reminds Sydney of their parents. She recalls their mother playing the piano, while Joseph thinks of their father. As she hums an old tune from a stereo disc, she suddenly pleads with Joseph to take her back to her daughter. When it's finally time to leave, Sydney tidies up while Joseph packs and burns the last of their trash. But as they approach the pantry door, they find it boarded up. A message carved into a plank directs them to an old mill. Panicked, Sydney runs there, but Joseph catches up and calms her. Inside, they discover church pews in the basement and then, a decomposing body. A warning is carved nearby, revealing they are trapped in a time loop, along with an eerie invitation to sign beneath it if they understand and accept their fate. Sydney refuses to comply and flees, desperate to escape. But as she reaches the field, she suddenly feels sick, vomits blood, and realizes she cannot pass beyond an invisible boundary. Her brother rushes to pull her back to safety. When she regains consciousness, she is in disbelief and breaks down, crying as she thinks about her daughter. Joseph reveals that the body in the mill belonged to the very woman who gave him the notebook and allowed them to hide there. He recognized her by the antique clock, a family heirloom. The siblings wondered if anyone could find them, but they had covered their tracks too well, there was no chance of rescue. With no other choice, Joseph signs the warning. Instantly, a safe appears before them. Remembering the notebook, he enters a code and opens it, revealing a tape recorder and a note instructing him to say something aloud before closing the door to establish a connection. He follows the instructions, and moments later, when he plays back the recording, a stranger's voice responds. The voice claims they shouldn't be on the farm and reveals knowledge of their stolen money. Sydney quickly offers a share in exchange for their escape, but the recorder goes silent. Joseph suspects they are speaking to someone from the future. When Sydney repeats the process, the voice returns, stating that their presence disrupts the farm's delicate balance and must be erased. However, Joseph realizes that if these people truly wanted them gone, they would have done so already. Instead, the voice offers them a deal. The only way to escape is to stay on the farm and eliminate a mysterious visitor who will arrive at an unknown time. They must destroy his remains, after which these unseen forces will help them return home. With no choice but to wait, Joseph and Sydney return to the house. Sydney checks the closets and fridge, both fully stocked again with food and alcohol. Determined to stay vigilant, she positions herself to monitor every possible approach to the house. She believes they're already doomed but refuses to give up. Joseph suggests setting up a watch schedule while Sydney pours out the alcohol. They hide weapons around the yard and the mill, then take turns keeping watch. Sydney meticulously searches the house, studying old photographs and paintings on the walls, while Joseph stands guard. Nearly a year passes. The farm continues to provide them with everything they need: food, water, and shelter. Sydney spends her time researching old newspapers, magazines, and documents she finds in the house. She watches vintage broadcasts, practices using the bullhook, and lights campfires in the evenings. One day, she tells Joseph about a box of photographs she found in the mill. The images reveal that the portraits in the foyer do not depict the farm's original owners. The history of the land, seemingly displaced by unknown forces, only traces back to the Korean War in 1955, after which, there is no record of anyone living there. One particular photograph stands out: a naval officer who reportedly died in the house around that same time, supposedly from falling down the stairs. Sydney suspects that the mysterious forces controlling the house arrived around the time of the Korean War. They also created a time trap that ensnared her and Joseph the moment they stepped inside. Frustrated, Joseph blames himself and even their parents, convinced that whoever is behind this doesn't care about them. They're trapped simply because these people can do it. This leads to a heated argument between the siblings. Joseph believes Sydney doesn't trust him and thinks he's ready to abandon her. However, he quickly regains his composure and they reconcile. As time drags on, Joseph attempts to contact the unseen forces again, but the tape recorder remains silent. Desperate for answers, he pleads for any sign but receives nothing. Then, one day, a hooded stranger arrives at the farm. He spies on Sydney through binoculars before approaching the house and taking aim. Joseph spots him just in time to shout a warning, and the bullet misses. The stranger then fires at Joseph, forcing him to retreat into the house. A tense hunt begins, but the intruder remains elusive. Joseph attempts to retrieve weapons hidden in the field but is ambushed. Forced to flee back inside, he is soon overpowered by the stranger. Meanwhile, Sydney hears a familiar melody coming from the field, the same song their mother used to play. She rushes outside and sees someone with a tape recorder standing over Joseph's unconscious body. When she confronts the figure, an argument ensues, and she is wounded. She retreats to the house, bandages herself, and finds the closet mysteriously sealed again. In frustration, she tries to break it down, but a warning appears: "Do not open." At that moment, another safe materializes. Meanwhile, Joseph regains consciousness in a church with his legs bound. Sydney reopens the safe connection, insisting they must leave together. The strangers warn her that forcing the door open will kill them both. Just then, the intruder notices Joseph reaching for his gun and knocks him unconscious again. The visitor, unable to speak, hands Joseph a note instructing him to tell the strangers that he and Sydney have fulfilled their task. The intruder is dead. Sydney, now desperate, tries to get the strangers to explain why they are so certain the visitor isn't her mother. Before she can get answers, the connection is severed. In the church, the visitor forces Joseph to record a message confirming the intruder's death. He also requests help contacting Sydney so they can present proof. Sydney receives the message and rushes to rescue him. Meanwhile, the visitor communicates in writing, revealing that he is searching for the person who murdered his family. Sydney accidentally makes noise outside, causing the visitor to rush out. A shootout ensues, and the visitor flees. Joseph seizes the moment to grab his gun and free himself. Sydney chases the visitor into the house, where they engage in a brutal fight. She manages to wound him, knocking him down, and finally pulls off his mask, only to be shocked by the sight of her now adult daughter, Steph. Before Sydney can process this revelation, Joseph bursts in and shoots. She instinctively shields Steph, taking the bullet instead. As Joseph mourns his dying sister, Steph escapes through the pantry, leaving him alone. Left with no other option, Joseph reports to the strangers that the visitor is gone. He buries Sydney and waits at the mill as instructed. Moments later, he is transported to an unknown location, where he meets the voices behind the tape recorder, an enigmatic man and woman. They demand information about the visitor, but Joseph knows nothing. They inform him that he and Sydney broke the rules, and for that, they will be erased. Apologizing, Joseph begs for one last chance. Surprisingly, they grant it. Joseph is sent back to the very first day at the cafe, reliving the cycle yet again. This time, he confesses everything to Sydney. He has lived through this loop countless times, always failing to prevent her death. The only way to break free, he insists, is for her to kill him now, take the money, and return to her daughter. Sydney hesitates but ultimately pulls the trigger, shooting Joseph as police sirens approach. It's a bizarre and unsettling film, offering no clear resolution. Who is truly behind it all? What do they hope to achieve? And why was Sydney's daughter the one she was fated to kill? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more amazing videos.